So let's talk about the third shark circling in the water. And you described it to me as somebody turning up with performance that's changed, it's decreased, it's not,
Yes.
not as it was.
Yes.
But it's not really clear what's going on.
Yes. People doing regular sport and exercise are much more in contact with their body and therefore much more aware when things are not working as well as they should. And it may be as straightforward as the cyclist with a hill that they ride up frequently and is now having to do it in the little chain ring, not the big chain ring. And people who measure wattage when they cycle and compare it with heart rate, and they're now finding that they have a higher heart rate for a lower wattage and therefore a decreased performance. So it's a common reason people come to talk. And it bumps into COVID from 2020 on in a huge way, because for many people it seemed to coincide with COVID and having COVID and not recovering properly from COVID. But it's by no means confined to that. And quite a common thing is to see often a very accomplished athlete who's reached late 60s, and they may have been of national or international standard when they were senior, and now they say, I can't keep up at the club run. And so you have to almost do a process of eliminating common things, which might be an explanation. And for some people, you have to end up saying, well, that's just the way it is, I'm sorry. And for some people, you can provide an explanation, and for some of them, you can provide a treatment. I mean, an obvious example that shouldn't reach the cardiologist and should have been dealt with already is they've become anemic.
Right. Which is a lovely diagnosis for you, because it's a magic pill, isn't it? You can give them an instant cure.
The one that's even better than that is overactive or underactive thyroid.
Oh, really?
You seem like a genius.
Oh, really? Yeah. So for these people, this cohort that rocks up with, you know, if not a sudden, a tangible
yes,
change.
a real, that's not due to the ebb and flow of form.
Yeah, I've lost 50 watts.
Yes, and I've lost it for 3 months.
Right.
Because some people perhaps are a little too self-observant and might consult after a couple of weeks.
Right.
And I hope sympathetically say to them, well, me too. Maybe just give it a bit longer.
Sure.
But let's say, so more, as you rightly say, a concrete example might be somebody whose functional threshold power is normally 250 watts and now it's 200 watts, and that's sustained and it's been for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then you have to have a proper structured systematic approach to understand what's going on. And maybe helpful just to say a little bit about the way that you do it. So talk to them in some detail. You know, there may be all sorts of clues that they hadn't linked to this. They may have rectal bleeding because they've got a polyp in their colon and they're now anemic, as to return to the previous example. If you examine them, there may be something blindingly obvious. They've developed heart valve disease and the blood can no longer circulate efficiently around the body. But sometimes that initial sort of inquiry yields nothing. They look quite healthy, but what they're saying is plausible and real. And so what you would do next is to evaluate their function objectively. We can do it with cardiopulmonary exercise testing, a ramp test on a bicycle, looking at inspired and expired gases, heart rate and blood pressure, and that gives you a great deal of information about cardiovascular and respiratory function and what might be wrong. And what I would often do, certainly for people beyond the age of 40, is what's called an exercise echo. So that's a cardiac ultrasound, which would probably show normal findings at rest, get them to go quite hard, and then ultrasound the heart as they're going very hard. And if there's a blockage in a heart artery, which is now manifest as a cardiovascular inefficiency, we would see that on the exercise ultrasound. And although that's quite a big deal for the person, I'm quite pleased because, first of all, we've identified it, we've made a diagnosis, and also we've got an excellent chance we can fix it for them.
which is my next question. So if we take away the stuff that isn't anything to do with you, other than the fact you've been a good doctor and found it,
Yes.
so let's take away the rectal bleeding and take away other issues, thyroid or whatever, and stick with the cardiovascular stuff. Is their prognosis, this group, good, generally speaking?
It depends. It's such a broad thing that the unhelpful answer is it depends.
Not helpful.
I'm sorry. So the prognosis might be excellent.
Right.
Let's take a person. So common things. A person in their 60s has developed a narrowed aortic valve. The aortic valve is the outlet valve of the heart. The heart pumps, the blood goes out through a one-way valve. That valve's opened and shut 100,000 times a day throughout that person's life, and it wears out, just like all moving parts on wall machines. It's wearing out, and the way it's wearing out is that it's opening to less fully than it should. So it opens partly, and it reaches a point where the heart cannot push enough blood out to meet the body's demands, and so that may manifest simply as a loss of performance. We can fix that. You can replace that worn out valve with an artificial valve, either with a keyhole approach or with a cardiac surgical approach. And after a period of rehabilitation and re-enablement, that person can go back to normal. And although doctors are a little sort of reluctant to talk about cure, it's curative. They're fixed.
Good.
And as long as it's not so far gone as the heart itself has failed, as long as we've seen it before that point, it's highly rewarding to treat because you can make the person so much better. If we take perhaps another common but more complicated example, we take myocarditis. So that's different. That represents inflammation of the heart muscle. And that may be caused by a virus, and it may be caused by an inflammatory condition such as rheumatoid arthritis, or it may not be entirely clear what's caused it, but what we can see is the heart muscle is inflamed and a bit like a boil in our skin. It's angry and it's not functioning as it should. And so when we look at the heart, it's not contracting well. And when we do an MRI scan, we can see that that's because the heart muscle is inflamed. And that's more involved for several reasons. The first is that you have to tell that person to stop exerting themselves. And I'm approaching that as a person who wants to facilitate people doing exercise, but I can't...
I can back you up on that.
But I can't do that for everyone.
No.
So the first thing is to say, sorry, we've got to let this get better. For some people, it's causing a severe degree of abnormality, and they may require strong medicine and anti-inflammatory drugs such as intravenous steroids to damp down the process of inflammation. And we may need to give medication which can help in the healing process in the heart. And then we need to keep a careful eye on that person to see the process of inflammation resolve, and hopefully the heart muscle function improve. So there it's a more complicated group, and the outlook may be good, but sadly in some cases it may not be so.
And for clarity's sake, so the context here is that exercise, especially intensive exercise, is acutely inflammatory if it's then chronically anti-inflammatory. So
yes.
You're trying to avoid the acute inflammation phase on top of...
Yes, it's observational stuff that again comes from Scandinavia, where they found people who had clearly got acute myocarditis, continued to engage in moderate and high intensity exercise, did worse than people who rested. It starts with that. And that's now part of coaching law. People are worried about that. And so if you've got a viral infection and it's from the throat and above, carry on. And if it's below, stop, or at least...
And that's not nonsense. That's you stand by that.
For sure. If you train with flu, you're stupid.
Yeah, because it's already an inflammation, and you're...
Well, for two reasons. First of all, you're not getting training benefit.
No training effect, yeah.
You're not getting any training benefit. And second, you may do yourself harm.
Yeah.
So just, have a word with yourself.
Absolutely right. I mean, and this is where having worked with you for, I don't know how many years now, many, many years, what I can say is that, and this is where I think you're superb with my clients, is you totally understand they've got a niche to scratch.
Yes.
And they get it, and they know that you get it. and they know that, you know, if you say, look, get on your turbo trainer and turn your legs over, heart rate, you know, 100, 110, you know that that's important for them to do that, even if there's very limited training effect.
Most people who come to see me for sort of further opinion have already had excellent care. Whatever type of heart trouble they've had, it would be rare to think, oh, I wouldn't have done that.
I've never heard you say that in all the years.
No, and I've very rarely come across it. But what the colleague who's looked after them, the perspective they have not had is of the person for whom exercise is as important as their marriage or their job. And so it's a big deal to say, turn that dial down for that person. Yeah. And the point of intuitive mutual recognition comes where I would say, I don't like not training for a day. I'm really bothered if I can't train for a day. And so I might bring a bit of knowledge to the party, but we are, to mix the metaphor, we're on the same page.
But you're part of the tribe.
Yes, and to be honest, in the cycling world, I might well know them, or at least know somebody that knows them.
Yeah.
True.